Hi, and welcome to the show. Subscribe at kevinmd.com/podcast. Today, we welcome Gail Fiore. She's a psychotherapist and litigation stress coach. Today's Kevin MD article is Recognizing and Addressing Medical Malpractice Stress Syndrome. Gail, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm very excited to talk about how to beat medical malpractice litigation stress.
All right. So, how did you get into this area? And tell us, what exactly is a litigation stress coach?
Okay. How we got into this, Kevin, is that in 2008, I was the subject of a medical malpractice lawsuit. I had been in practice for over 25 years. Then I received a complaint. I was shocked. When I received this complaint, I had the wind knocked out of me. I felt like I was in the twilight zone. And what I'd like to say to your listeners is this: it doesn't matter how successful you are as a professional. It doesn't matter how good you feel about yourself as a person. When you receive a complaint in the mail, a professional medical liability complaint, it knocks the wind out of you. It makes your heart stop. So, since I was in the field of mental health, I had a private practice. I put myself in psychotherapy to cope with the stress of being in a litigation. And being in the field, I knew who was the top talent in my city. So that's where I went. But in spite of my respect for their talent and my respect for them and their devotion to try to help me, the best these psychologists could do was to give me consolation. They would say to me, "Don't let the bastards get you down." But that kind of consolation doesn't work. It actually makes things much worse because I would end up leaving the conversation thinking, if all they could do for me is give me consolation, then there must be something really bad here going on. So, after about a year into the case, I made a decision that I could no longer call my sister or my friends and tell them that I was depressed and suicidal. I realized I had to help myself. So I Googled psychological symptoms of being in a lawsuit. And all this research came up by Dr. Sarah Charles. You may be aware that she did all this research about a physician's psychological experience of being in a litigation. And her research was beautiful. So I devoured all of it, and then I researched further the experiences of other physicians who had been in litigation and who had felt that they were traumatized by the experience as well. Some provided excellent guidance on how to deal with the legal dynamics of being in a litigation, but no one ever really said, here's a way to resolve the litigation stress. So I developed one. I did it. So after I did it, I was my first patient. I made the first treatment plan. I started getting a lot of positive feedback from my sister, from my friends, from my attorney. And that's when I realized I had something that could help other people. So I called up Sarah, explained it to her, and she said, take it to professional medical liability companies and get it out there. So I did. I call this my proprietary protocol, and it has helped many physicians over the past 8 years. And that's how I ended up in this. And the reason why I'm talking to you today is I understand the pain of being in a lawsuit. It is awful. And I'm talking to you today because I want to reach out to physicians who are struggling with being in a litigation. They're struggling with litigation stress. Those that are currently in a lawsuit, those who were in a lawsuit because the lawsuit still haunts them. That litigation stress does not necessarily go away because the lawsuit ends. And those who are not in a lawsuit, who fear a lawsuit that could possibly come their way. And what I want to say to them is have hope. There is a solution. There is a way that you can control your litigation stress instead of it controlling you. That's how I got into this.
All right. And you talk, of course, more about that in your Kevin MD article, Recognizing and Addressing Medical Malpractice Stress Syndrome. So, talk about that article. And I guess before you do, tell us what exactly malpractice stress syndrome is and how is that stress different from other types of stress?
That medical malpractice litigation stress syndrome, what it's really about is distinguishing legitimate concerns from fears. And what happens when you're in that litigation is you can't sift out what is a fear from a valid apprehension because it all gets mixed up for you. And in addition to that, every personal issue you have when you're in litigation, that gets lit up. It gets lit up into crisis. So the issue is that if it's a fear, fears haven't happened yet, right? And so, since they haven't happened yet, there really isn't sufficient data to substantiate them. You can contort information, you can contort experience to make you think it's real, but in fact, the case isn't over yet. You haven't lost the case. You haven't been found guilty of being negligent. You haven't lost your last dime. And physicians can get caught up in that as opposed to valid, legitimate concerns that have actual concrete data to substantiate them. And so I can go into all the symptoms of litigation stress, but that's really what it's about getting caught up in the fear. And in my work with physicians over the past 8 years, I would do the initial consultation and find out what was really going on with them. And what would come to the fore were four major fears. The first fear that I heard the most was the fear that they made a mistake. Even if they would deny that at the beginning of the interview, once we really got into the meat of the interview, then that fear would then crop up. Well, yes, I do worry and wonder if I missed something, if I should have gotten a consult, etc. And what happens is that they can get caught up in that and then start living in response to that fear. And that fear would sabotage them, undermine their confidence and their competence and how they practice. The other fears that would come up that would be common is fear that they would lose the resources to be able to provide for themselves and their family. Another one is fearing rejection from peers and from family. And then also the haunting fear, who's going to sue me next? And what's the next bad thing that's going to happen to me? The name of the game is this. The name of the game is to get someone to help you identify your fears, sift them out from valid concerns that need to be logically addressed, and not to get caught up in living out a script in response to a non-reality.
Now, as we know, sometimes these malpractice cases can last years, right? This isn't something that's resolved in a matter of
Years.
weeks. Now, talk about some of the stories that you've heard from your physician clients about the toll it extracts from them professionally as well as at home.
They're very worried about their children. The litigation turns their family life upside down. A lot of concern about marriages. Some marriages, the partner is right behind them. Some marriages, I've had partners call me up, and it really undermines and deteriorates the marriage. Sometimes the partner it's as necessary for the partner to participate in litigation stress coaching as much as the physician, because attorneys tell them, don't talk about the
Yeah.
case. So we don't hear, they usually don't share with me or with their coach the nitty gritty of the case or what they in actuality do in their practice, but you can hear that they become much more cautious about what they do. And I would say basically that's it.
It must be tremendously isolating for physicians who are undergoing a medical malpractice lawsuit. The fact that it's completely upending their personal and professional lives, yet they're not really allowed to talk about it with everyone.
And that is, I would say that is the most common complaint that they have to me, that oftentimes another physician is involved and they can't go and talk to that physician about what happened, and so they have to carry that around, that unresolved issues and questions inside of them, and they can't debrief with the other physician, and it gets all tangled up, what they're accused of, what they're not accused of, what they feel that they should be responsible and what not. They can't debrief with the other party, and the other party is probably going through the same thing.
Now, other than coaches like yourself who specialize in this, do physicians have any other resources that they could turn to?
That brings up two points that I want to say. First of all, Kevin, I'm a psychotherapist, been a psychotherapist for 40 years, love being a psychotherapist, constantly have myself in more and more training to be even a better psychotherapist. With that, I am going to tell you that psychotherapy is contraindicated for dealing with litigation stress, because the therapist, in an attempt to be empathetic, will say to the physician, "Tell me more," or say to the physician, "Oh, what a terrible burden you're carrying." That puts the client, the physician client, in a position to talk more and more about the fear. So they represent the fear to themselves. They reinfect themselves with trauma. They build up in their mind that the fear is legitimate and real, and they build up their anxiety instead of dismantle their anxiety. What in fact has to occur is for the psychotherapist to be able to recognize what is a fear and what is a legitimate concern, examine the fear with the client, enable them to see that it doesn't hold water, and then to delete that fear and not to live out a life in response to that fear. That's the primary reason why psychotherapy is contraindicated. The other reason is this: psychotherapy, for the most part, is client-centered. So when you're in litigation stress, as I said earlier, every main issue or problem that you have gets lit up. So you're going to come into this session, and whatever is most problematic at the moment is what you're going to dive into. So you're going to dive into, oh, my partner is upset. I'm having a problem with my adolescent child. The person who's supposed to do the intakes is not doing them right. You're going to get lost in that. You're going to go down rabbit holes, and you're not going to deal with what the root of litigation stress is really all about, which is to deal with the fears and get it out of your mind. Again, one of the most common complaints I hear from physicians when I do initial consultations is that they can't get the case out of their head. And the way to do that is to identify the fears.
So, what are some tips that you can share with physicians who are listening to you now who may be dealing with litigation stress? What are some tips that you could share with them, short of finding a coach like yourself who specializes in this? What are some things that they can do?
I guess if I was to come up with something like that, I would say that this: write all of what you perceive your concerns are, list them, and then go down through them. And if you can, go down through them with someone close to you. Is there evidence to substantiate the concerns and issues that you listed? Really scrutinize that evidence. Is there evidence to a particular issue that you listed? Okay. If there isn't sufficient evidence to it, delete it. Don't waste any more time thinking about it, considering it, get it out of your mind, and then address the concerns that do have validity to them, that do need to be problem solved. I would also say something like this: And I'm going to say, I'm really going to encourage physicians to get some kind of professional assistance. I'm going to say it for this reason. Videos are great. YouTubes are great. Websites are great. Books are great on litigation stress, okay? But they are not enough to free a person from the intensity of experiencing litigation stress. What is needed here is the human touch. And that is why I'm going to say it is beneficial for them to find someone who understands the dynamics of litigation stress, can help them sift out fears from realistic or real concerns, and then delete them and to move on with their lives. Because if not, it can hold you captive, and you don't want to be captive.
So tell me a success story of a physician, or it could be an amalgamation of cases, who have come to you for litigation stress and you moved the needle and really
Okay,
helped them out. Tell us a success story.
sure. I had one gynecologist call me, and she's also young. I'm going to define young as in her later 30s. She called me up sobbing over the phone over what happened to her patient, and insisting to me that she would not allow herself to feel better until she knew her patient was okay. So she was going to torture herself until she knew that patient was okay. And I interviewed her and heard her other concerns, referred her to a coach in my practice, and did follow up with her in 3 days. And I got, "Hi, Gail, how are you?" She was fine. So I get a lot of that. It's really interesting, the efficacy of the protocol. Some physicians can actually free themselves of the litigation stress in one session. Some physicians more, and some physicians love the relationship with the coach so much they don't want to stop. But I get many stories that their lives changed. And not only is the protocol helpful to help them deal with litigation stress, but it's relevant for all areas of their lives. And so they learn how to control their anxiety in other areas too. And we encourage them, teach what we teach you, teach your patients, and teach your children, and teach your friends, and teach your family members.
We're talking to Gail Fiore. She's a psychotherapist and litigation stress coach. Today's Kevin MD article is Recognizing and Addressing Medical Malpractice Stress Syndrome. Gail, let's end with some take home messages that you would like to leave with the Kevin MD audience.
I would say this is not a situation where it's physician heal thyself. Don't be proud. I know you want to feel that you should be able to handle this yourself. I know you want to be in control, but I want to say, seek someone who understands the dynamic of litigation stress. Allow yourself to be in a personal relationship. Get the help you need. There is a solution. You do not need to suffer needlessly alone. Get help. There is a solution.
Gail, thank you so much for sharing your perspective and insight, and thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you very much, Kevin. It's been a delight.